Today we're talking about one of the ways that we mill lumber on our property. Basically everything we build on the property, aside from some pressure treated lumber that's going in the ground, comes from timber that we mill in the area. It's nice to get everything all set up before you start the milling operation so you're not having to stop and make trips all over the place. Here you can see we use the larger section of a 40-foot extension ladder, giving us a nice 20-foot straight edge. We're using screws, shims, and metal strapping to eliminate any low spots, which will cause the ladder to twist when the weight of the chainsaw is passing over the top of it. It's essential that you secure the ladder where it comes off the log because the saw is pretty heavy and it'll cause your boards to taper at the ends. Don't put your metal strapping too tight, otherwise you'll have low spots. You can look down the ladder to make sure it's nice and straight and you don't have any cupping or twist. Some of the screws we're using are 4 inches long. You want to make sure that your drop for your saw doesn't contact those screws. It'll immediately dull your blade. This looks like about a 10-inch drop will be good. Here I'm finding something, which happens to be paint cans, to set the saw at a 10-inch depth. This way, as I'm tightening the depth gauge, it doesn't bind. We added a auxiliary oiler for the end of this saw since it's got a 5-foot bar. I just got a moped gas tank and used some hose clamps. I did a little bit of welding, but I'm sure it could be done without welding. And then I used a fuel line with a stopcock, and here I'm actually grabbing a zip tie. It does need some adjustment depending on how deep your cuts are. When it's this deep, it needs to be kind of pulled over to one side in order to drop the oil on the bar in the correct place. I'm taking advantage of this nice 10-inch gap to just put a quick little edge on here. I'm just throwing some lube on there and moving the chain around before I start sharpening. Just using a Dremel to just do quick hits and get a nice edge on the chain. If it was real far out, we'd put it on our bench sharpener, but there's no need for that in this scenario now. We're going ahead and adding fuel. We use canola oil for barn chain oil. It seems to work just fine for us. We also add that in our auxiliary oiler up here. This 881 has a traditional carburetor. It's pretty finicky. Once it turns over once, you've got to switch it, otherwise it'll flood, and it's kind of a pain to unflood this saw this big. Here you can see why it's important that we supported the edge of the ladder that comes off the log as I'm placing the heavy weight of the chainsaw out over the edge of the log. Here I'm running my winch line across, and I like getting the cut going, not utilizing the winch. And then once the bar is fully buried, you can go ahead and start utilizing the winch. If you try and do it too early, you run the risk of throwing the chain, and if you throw the chain right off the get-go, you may have to spend quite a bit of time deburring. I went ahead and just sped up through the actual cut. It took about 15-20 minutes on this top cut. Now I'm taking off all the shims and the bracing for the ladder. This top piece is pretty heavy, so I'm utilizing some wedges and just hammering them in so there's less friction on the log. At that point, I'm pulling my tractor forks up and just pushing that top piece off. Just be mindful of your fingers. Really be unfortunate to get them stuck under there, especially if there's nobody there to move the log. I don't think you'd be able to get out. We used to keep a lot of these, but they end up just piling up and they rarely get used, so they pretty much all end up in the burn pile at this point. This is a 20-foot 2x6 that we milled a while back. It was nice and straight, and we put 1.5 by 1.5 angle iron on both edges, and we used it as a straight edge. We initially used it for a perpendicular style Granberg. I believe it's Granberg. It might be a different make, but perpendicular chainsaw mill. And we were finding that when we made a perpendicular cut with the chainsaw, the bar had enough flex that we weren't getting perfectly square boards. Today we're milling siding, which is only 1.25 inches thick, and we don't want to run it through our joiner and our thickness planer for every single board. So we're going to utilize our beam saw, which will get us a nice 6-inch drop, and the boards will basically be ready to use right off the mill here. Basically, you run your straight edge so that your cut runs as close to the middle of the log on both sides as possible. You follow the grain down, you're essentially just looking for the middle on both sides. This saw has a 6 5/8 offset. I just write it on the top of the saw. So once I mark the middle, I just mark 6 5/8 over to each side, and then screw that straight edge on and run my beam saw across in several passes. I do about 2 inches for a total of 3 passes to get my 6-inch drop. Here we're just moving that straight edge off, and you can see we've got a nice straight right angle 6-inch deep cut. We have a loosely affixed zip tie for our stopcock on our auxiliary oiler. Find that the vibrations from the saw will sometimes turn the stopcock off and prevent oil from getting on the end of the bar. This pass took about another 15 minutes or so. We keep these stickers handy. We use them for drying lumber, and in this scenario we're going to use them to shim our boards up so that we can cross-cut them without contacting the log underneath. There's a nice straight edge running across the middle there, so we'll put a T-square and mark it and cross-cut it with our circular saw. We're going to be using this in 8-foot sections or less for siding, and this log is 15 feet long, so we're going to make a cut at 8 feet, which will give us 2 8-footers and 2 7-footers. Each are about 13 to 12 inches wide. So this is our first video that we're making. We do all kinds of stuff on the property here, from milling lumber to mechanical stuff, metal fabrication. This siding is actually going to be for a goat enclosure. We should be getting goats fairly soon. We're going to be adding to our chicken area and expanding it to include some goats that we'll be using for, at the very least to start, keeping that area of the property clear up there. You can see we just did a bunch of grading. We do a lot of earthwork. We're doing composting and looking to expand our vegetable garden. We also do a lot of marine stuff. Working on the boat, DC electrical. We're running electrical in our barn. This is our wood shop. We do a lot of our woodwork. So continue to follow our videos, and hope we can provide content that you like to see. Here we're just ripping those live edges off, making these boards as wide as possible. And then we'll be stickering them and drying them in the shop before we turn them into shiplap. We've done shiplap, we've done board and batten. It all works, but here it is, stickered and ready to be drying. We'll continue to hit that log and expand this pile. Keep following us for more videos.